just talk about your experience. We've talked about this before. Mighty Oaks doesn't solve anyone's problems. There are other great organizations. What we have the opportunity to do is to offer testimony, to offer direction, to offer hope, to point those who are hurting to the one who can provide the healing. And so it's not the organization that helps, but as much as it is the message of that organization. So what is it that during your time there during that week caused you to start thinking about things differently or looking at the world differently?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that I was really done with being tired and upset and angry and bitter. I didn't want to. That's something that I wanted to move away from.
That wasn't the life you wanted to live.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, I think it's important that I was able to make a connection with guys who were just real.
Right. Sure.
With where they were. Yeah. And to know that there were also guys who were willing to stand up for what's truth and what is true in their lives and where they were and where they are.
Yeah.
And I do remember that. That point came when the message that you actually shared on that, I believe it was a Thursday or maybe a Wednesday, I can't really exactly remember.
Yeah.
That talked about legacy.
Yeah.
And up until that point, I remember thinking to myself, man, my future is already laid out based off of my past decisions. That's what I believed. That's the way my mind was thinking.
That you couldn't control what was going to happen.
That's right. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. I was thinking that my future has already been laid out based off of what I've been through and the decisions that I've made. And until I came across that message. And then this light bulb came on and I realized that I have a choice going forward.
So talk about legacy for a minute. What is legacy? Why did that have an impact on you? We call our program the Legacy Program.
Yeah.
This means so much to us individually and as an organization. We now call our organization or our program that the Legacy Program. What is legacy? What does that mean to you?
Yeah.
How did that change that for you?
Yeah. What it meant to me is that I know that I've got children that have really, I think in a way, I thought in my mind, ruined relationships with. And how they would view me going forward. And in my mind, I was thinking that it was something I didn't want, actually.
Yeah.
So going forward, legacy to me meant that I would leave a different impact on them. I would leave them with a different view of who I was and who I am.
Yeah.
And the fact, just the hope to know that I had a choice going forward meant all the difference in the world.
Right. It wasn't predetermined, your path. You didn't have to have a bad legacy simply because of what happened in the past. Yeah. Change that.
And so knowing that going forward, I knew there was something I could do. And as a man, I felt that I needed to do something. I think that's how we all feel. We want something to do.
Yep.
The one thing I know that I could do based off of the message that you shared was to get to know the one who made me.
Right. Yeah, understanding that there is a creator means that there must be a plan. He created us with a plan.
Yeah.
And if we'll align to that, it changes everything.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's me understanding where I am and being truthful about that and knowing where I can go on the decisions that I can make going forward.
Yeah. What were some of the decisions that you made that you feel have changed maybe your legacy or the legacy of your family?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I know primarily the decision that I made that day was to commit a life to Christ, really commit a life, living a life according to how Christ wants me to live it. And in order for me to do that, I have to get to know who he is.
Yep.
Well, in order to get to know who he is, I have to read his word that he's preserved all to this point.
Right.
And I only say that because there are so many relationships in my life that I thought I just burned, I ruined, and they'll never be the same again. But the one relationship I know that I could do something about was this relationship with God.
Right.
And so if I could do something about that by getting to know him through his word, that would affect every other relationship.
Yeah.
And it did.
Yeah. How did that affect the other relationships?
Well, slowly going home, I mean, you say it all the time, going home, the problems are still there.
Yeah.
But somehow that didn't matter to me. Somehow going home, I knew that I could do something about the relationship right in front of me, which was with Christ. And so as I went home, the expectations were there for me to be who I used to be.
Sure. The expectation from your wife,
that's
from
right.
your kids,
Yeah, to be who I used to be. And so my faith was really, my trust was really in God and building this relationship with God, not to get a reaction, but to just do that.
Yeah.
And in that, I stayed really on this path that somehow, some way, they realized I was not getting off of that.
So that's like the most important thing we could possibly communicate, right? Because men and women go home, they've made a decision to change or to follow Christ. And they get really frustrated really quickly because they really have made a decision to change. But their family doesn't buy into that right away. Their kids don't respect them the way they think they should. Their wife, she's seen changes in the past and decisions in the past, and none of them have held. And so we do damage to those relationships over a lifetime. And we go home and we hope that over a weekend we'll fix it. And that's the message is stop worrying about the other relationships. Worry about the one relationship you can control, the relationship with the Creator, with God, and be consistent over time. And be an example and demonstrate that you can be trusted, that it is real.
Yeah, and through that, I learned and I realized that I've given my wife and my children all the reason to believe what they do believe about me at that point. I've given them all the reason.
It's justified.
Yeah. And so for me to expect them to change their minds overnight, I realized that was unrealistic. And so through that, I learned patience and I learned grace for them, just like I've been shown grace. And I've grown in that. And as I move through that, and they see the differences, the lack of reactions that used to be, that causes this advancement in my life, growing closer to God, and eventually, because of that, growing closer to them.
What, looking back, if you could say, here are some of the things that are different now. We talk about legacy. Here are some things in my legacy that are different today because of a decision I made back there. What are some of the things that you'd say?
Yeah, I would certainly say that, well, first of all, I have to say that going home, did I make mistakes? Yes. Were there disagreements between us? Yes. I think the major difference is the amount of time that went by before I realized that I need to ask for forgiveness. It was much shorter. It actually existed. Before it wasn't.
There were still problems, but it was how you dealt with those problems.
That's right. And how my reaction to those problems when they did arise, because they were going to. They did arise. And so the fact that there was true repentance from me. And certain situations where I started to think about things differently. These thoughts that I used to think weren't there anymore. Made a huge impact on my interactions with my wife and my children, to the point I could remember one day me being on this path, and I come and I'm making breakfast for my wife. She comes downstairs, and this is like a couple of months after I go home, and she looks at me and she has tears in her eyes, and she says, I'm sorry. And I go, well, why? What's going on? What happened? She goes, these past 2 months have been the best 2 months of our 14-year marriage. And in that point in my life, I realized it was somehow, some way God communicating to me that I was on the good path. I was on the right path.
It's amazing.